By design or default, post the pandemic, digital transformation has taken center stage across sectors, and disruption is the new normal. So, to navigate through these dynamic times and stay agile, business leaders need to innovate at an unprecedented pace. Hello and welcome to AWS and CNBC-TV18.com present the Boardroom Dialogues, and I'm your host Ruchira Sharma. This exclusive series of roundtable discussions features leading voices from the industry to focus on how companies can leverage new age technologies and Gen AI tools to transform the business landscape. As we speak, more and more organizations are reimagining the nature of work by building a remote and hybrid workforce and also using intelligent technologies to boost collaboration and craft customer-centric journeys. And generative AI has been a true game changer here. Truly a formidable force of human-machine collaboration, and as per reports, it is estimated to yield an annual economic value of USD 2.6 to USD 4.4 trillion globally. And the IT sector in particular has been an early adopter of generative AI to elevate customer experience and unlock data analytics. And that is the topic of this discussion, the future of the IT industry, harnessing Gen AI for transformation. And today we have an eminent panel of industry experts with us. Through this discussion, we will focus on how generative AI can drive innovation and growth for the IT sector, also understand the opportunities and the challenges and the road ahead for this sector. So before we begin, I would like to introduce our esteemed panelists. We have with us Mr. Debashish Singh, CIO, Persistent. We also have Mr. Ramakrishnan Venkat Subramaniam, CDO, Bhavan Cybertech. We have Mr. Kush Kumar, SIP Delivery Director at Cognizant. We have Mr. Regin Surendran, Global CIO at Wipro Enterprise. We also have Mr. Rahul Joshi, CTO at Innovate. We have Mr. Rajneesh Kini, President and Chief Technology Officer at Cyient. We also have with us Mr. Raghav Gopalakrishnan, Corporate Vice President WTS, WNS Global Services Limited, and Mr. Guru Prasad NV, AVP at Infosys. And we also have with us Mr. Luke Anderson, Managing Director, AI ML, AWS Asia, Pacific and Japan. Well, thank you gentlemen for joining us today, and in this discussion we'll be focusing on how have you been monetizing your Gen AI offerings, how are you actually using Gen AI to increase organizational productivity, and also understand generative AI across the three pillars of security, cost and governance. So let me start with you, Mr. Debashish. As a digital engineering and enterprise modernization partner, how are you really harnessing Gen AI to drive transformation within your organization? If you could give us some use cases especially.
Perfect. Let me start with the internal cases first. Gen AI, as the kind of buzzword started going across the industry, we started finding what are the different areas we can utilize internally. And the first thing which comes to mind is curating content inside the enterprise. As we all know, there are huge number of systems, data points, and so on and so forth. Sure. And to navigate inside that is a huge challenge for anyone who comes new, even for the people who are there in the system. So creating and curating the content around it and summarizing and giving those output. That is one use case. And we kind of build our entire knowledge management system based on that. So what it does is all your frameworks, all your IPs that you have built over a period, it gives you just at a single command. So you don't have to really kind of spend time rebuilding and probably searching for those content. So that was one case, of course, which we did. Subsequent to that, we had another interesting use case, which is a migration requirement internally. And we create a model using Gen AI. And now that is available as a migration factory system that we are kind of taking to our customers as well, which enables us to migrate any system from one old technology or one technology to a new one. And that is really kind of giving us an edge over the competition as well. So just looking forward, these are just at a high level view of this. And as you get into details, we'll discuss more.
All right, so coming to you, Luke, what are your thoughts on the current state of AI adoption, particularly in the IT industry in India? Because India, of course, has been an early adopter, and it is also AI, the Gen AI offerings have been a huge catalyst for India's dream of achieving the 1 trillion economy. So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, we're seeing rapid adoption across the IT market in India, but it's following similar trends to other countries that I'm seeing across Asia Pacific and Japan, which is sort of the movement through the identify curiosity stage of playing around with ChatGPT through to deploying internal experimentation for certain use cases. We're now at this point, this inflection point, which is many of our customers are now wanting to productionalize and scale out these experiments, and they're looking to it in a very rapid way. Debashish touched on the use cases, and one in particular around knowledge management, which is one of the fastest growing use cases that we're seeing migrating from this experimentation to productionalization. One example, and it's not just the sort of the latest innovating organizations. One of our launch customers for Amazon Bedrock in Tokyo, Takenaka Corporation, is a construction organization, but yet they've now deployed Amazon Bedrock in a RAG architecture to build an intelligent knowledge management database, just providing much easier, seamless access to their knowledge management. Another use case that we're seeing, particularly for IT, and we're seeing it grow quite phenomenally within India, is the code generation. So whether it's Amazon Code Whisperer or other equivalents out there, we're seeing IT organizations really starting to realize the productivity and efficiency gains of code companions, or the ability to create code through prompt-based, analyze code, or even start identifying vulnerabilities within existing code. And again, we also touched on migration as well. It's not necessarily migrating application from on-premise to cloud or within one application to another. We're also seeing migrating code from maybe a more legacy coding, such as Perl, which is what I used about 20 years ago, through to some of the latest coding architectures, just to bring the organizations up to more of a consistent equal state.
All right, thanks for that. Coming to you, Mr. Guru Prasad. Infosys, of course, has been a huge player here, and McKinsey has predicted that the potential of Gen AI into the global economy will be phenomenal, equivalent to UK's GDP in 2021. So could you share how are you really harnessing Gen AI to drive transformation across your platform offerings and solutions for your customers, and also share some specific use cases where you've achieved your business outcomes with the power of Gen AI?
Absolutely. While the numbers are debatable, they are quite big and they're growing on a day-to-day basis. As far as our strategy is concerned, as I said earlier, revisited this to see how AI and generative AI in particular can be put to good use. And we've started with the software development lifecycle. So not just coding or not just testing, every aspect of the SDLC lifecycle, we believe there is potential to augment AI there and derive value out of that. So we are using it extensively for requirements gathering. We have our own initiatives where we are able to augment our developers with coding assistants, and we are building something in-house as well. Apart from that, we are also able to increase the level of automation, do code quality checks, so on and so forth. So besides the typical IT use cases, we're also seeing a significant traction in the customer help desk or the service desk area. Just to give you an example, we've been able to unlock the value that's there in call recordings. I mean, if you just take a contact center use case, a lot of organizations have call recordings, but they don't have, or rather they don't have a good knowledge base that is extracted out of these call recordings. So we've been able to unlock that. We've been able to improve the knowledge base. And what that does is it also helps us to improve automation, because now you have a good quality knowledge base that helps in self-heal and various other initiatives. So there are a lot of use cases that have emerged, and we've taken a very strategic approach of looking at SDLC first and then extending that to other areas.
All right. Coming to you, Rahul, could you share examples of successful Gen AI initiatives within your organization that have actually helped you achieve your business outcomes? If you could share some interesting cases there.
So interesting that you are asking about use cases, given that you have said it. Interesting that you are asking about use cases when you said the use cases will generate an economic value of equivalent to UK's economy. So I'm
GDP, yes.
very worried. So, but having said that, we have been able to leverage Gen AI internally as well as externally. We have launched platforms around it, and we are fairly successful, at least in the pilots and implementations, where we have leveraged Gen AI solutions to bring value to our customers. So we are like close to achieving 30% ROI on the use cases that we have built for our customers on the pilot basis.
Sure.
And we are also able to successfully tell them how we can increase the customer experience. And this is very important for an organization like us, which has almost 70% of the revenue coming from customer experience portfolio,
All right.
which is DCX and EPS.
All right.
So it's very important that we achieved it. And I believe one of the things that we faced challenges was obviously data security, and we were able to achieve and overcome those challenges because we leveraged the frameworks that Amazon and Microsoft provided for that.
Sure. So we'll come back to that in detail after this. But I'd like to bring you in, Rajneesh. How is Cyient embracing Gen AI to gain a competitive edge? And if you could also tell us a little bit more about the role of generative AI when it comes to predictive maintenance, especially in the aerospace sector.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Yeah, so Cyient is an engineering and technology convergence player, right? And back in 2020, we decided that everything that we do in engineering needs to have that additional technology acceleration, and AI was a key element to it, starting with traditional AI. But over the last 12 months, there is a lot of generative AI use cases in each of those scenarios. We picked up 4 segments. I think one of them we have talked a lot about, which is the knowledge management. So I'll not go into details of that. But the first one in my sequence is design automation, right? In engineering, when you create CAD models, and there is a lot of work that happens on your wire harness within automotive, aerospace industry, etc. And bringing AI and now generative AI to automate that process has yielded significant results over the last 2 to 3 years, and now with generative AI over the last 12 months for us. Second is on development and test acceleration. We use a lot of accelerators within to help our customers accelerate that journey, whether it is engineering code migration from legacy platforms to new platforms, test case automation, or a lot of industries that we work are very regulatory stringent, right? Compliance oriented, like aerospace, healthcare. And you need to create a lot of regulatory compliant documentation for them to go live with their products. And generative AI has been significantly useful there to, instead of having 200, 300 people sitting and creating that documentation, we have been able to do that with automated report generation by providing the parameters that are required for each of those products.
Sure.
The third area is on decision making, and that's where I'll come to the predictive maintenance as well in a minute. But decision making using the intelligence that you have and the data coming from various IoT and sensors to continuously make the right decision for the equipments is a key factor, and generative AI has been helping there. Now, when it comes to aerospace is going through a significant change in the last 12 months plus, and we are in the center of it as a engineering organization, where they have a significant demand driven by Indian economy and various other countries. There is a need for increased production capacity, increased operational efficiency, as well as bringing in a lot of older engines and equipments back into action, because they really have to bring everything that they have available to work for the transportation industry, right? So MRO is critical there, and predictive maintenance as well as the continuous operations of MRO is significant. We worked with a couple of customers there. We had a customer where there were about 40 to 50,000 documents, triple ticket information, various sources of information that was used in MRO industry, and there are a lot of people looking at analyzing the MRO data and coming up with a resolution. We were able to put together a solution very effectively to reduce the resolution time and come up with the right predictions for the root cause of the problem, right, for the equipment. And that has helped significantly. And in MRO industry specifically, I think that helps to somewhere around 40% in terms of downtime of the equipment, which is a major impact.
That's very important. Thank you for those insights. I'd like to bring you in, Mr. Ram. One of the key benefits of generative AI is, of course, to accelerate, the way the development team really works. So how have you done that? How have you really enabled your development teams to leverage Gen AI tools to actually ensure faster delivery of products? If you could share some things there.
Certainly. We have been using AWS Code Whisperer as well, and other industry tools. One is the developer productivity, which is pretty much a need of the hour, and we have seen significant productivity improvements, savings in that. Besides, we also gone to the extent where we are able to really generate an entire application out of generative AI, which means we are able to build some of our productivity apps, be it time management or be it approval systems. We have had fairly good success in developing some of this out and out from generative AI based techniques. So it's a little beyond just the software engineering, the code assistance, but it's also about altogether building an application out and out from generative AI. It's not only the developers, but also the different aspects of the software development lifecycle, and even at a pre-sales stage, a significant opportunity to leverage, be it proposal writing, be it content creation, be it some of the analysis that we do from secondary research, market research. We have all done that and then tested out to a lot of our advantage. So the art of possible is significantly high, and I have seen this work like a charm for us, right from us bidding for an opportunity to closure to execution and then the sign off. So it's an one continuum where I could see this being effective, and we are evolving. And besides this, I think there's also the industry use cases I would like to talk about. It's about each industry has significant amount of problems, be it either the IT industry, which we all working, and also the operational technology, the predictive maintenance that we see. The power goes to the end user here. One of the challenges in predictive maintenance and the discrete industries is about the user themselves are not sophisticated, unlike IT industry. So there's quite a bit of errors that comes from the field. Generative AI is a great mechanism. In fact, we are working with some of our OEM partners to really capture that and eliminate all biases, so that the continuous performance industries, we are able to do a good job of predictive maintenance and improve upon the outcomes.
All right.
I can go on, but I would also like to add to the India story. We have a large India business. We work with government organizations. We work with PSUs. We work with private India corporate companies. What we have observed is also the India digital stack, which is the payments, the identity. There's also the AI stack emerging. And recently I read about also the Bharat GPT. And besides the sovereign AI frame fabric that is going to be developed by the Indian Indian government and the researchers, right? So we see a humongous opportunity in adapting to such a homogeneous stack, and this is going to be also I think percolated to some of our neighboring countries as well.
Absolutely.
As we see. So looking forward to a lot more evolution as we get into the digital India policy, and then we build that scale and the economics around this.
Definitely. So we'll come back to scalability and the challenges. I'd like to bring you in, Mr. Kush. Could you tell us at Cognizant what productivity improvement have you witnessed within your development teams when they're leveraging the limitless potential of generative AI tools?
So at Cognizant, primarily, right, we have understood the importance of Gen AI. We have designed our own cognitive architecture, primarily, in 4 areas. One of them being development lifecycle navigator. Now, as part of that, right, so what that allows the developer to, coming to your question, is the ability to fail as many times as possible, right? We pay a lot of premium to the success, right? But success comes after a lot of failure.
Sure.
So unless you try 10 different ways to do things faster or optimize better, right, you would not reach the the final stage. In a regular traditional model, right, you would come up with a design and you will code for it, and then the cost of failure is high.
Absolutely.
If you haven't factored in certain factors as your design. But if you are using, or if you are merging it with Gen AI, right, then you will see the results faster. So you have more time to come up with a better solution.
primarily, just not at the development. So I'm part of, one of the products at Cognizant, right? Life sciences product. The way shared investigator platform, it's used in more than 170 countries, and we have close to 300k users, right? We are now looking at, when we are looking at a roadmap of my product, I'm actually looking at Gen AI to analyze my usage pattern, right? Tell me what is more important on my roadmap. Right now I only hear from my customers.
Sure.
Some representatives from customer who say that, okay, I need this, because I think this is important, right? I want to understand the usage pattern. I want to understand, and when you ask for surveys, right, when you send customers satisfaction survey, not everybody writes what they want.
Absolutely.
Right? So I'm looking at Gen AI to also analyze those usage patterns and help me drive my roadmap as well. So it's something which I think my colleague mentioned, right? It's something which is a continuum,
A process,
and
yes.
a process. And the more we dive into it, the more we realize, we can embed it more and more.
There's scope for more, yes. So you all spoke about it. I'd like to come to you, Mr. Raghav. What are the primary challenges? You all kind of touched upon the challenges. While generative AI has, unprecedented potential to transform the business landscape, especially in this sector, what are the challenges that you have faced, and how have you overcome them, especially in terms of the right model that you want to choose?
Absolutely, it's a very good question. I think predominantly the data security, the data sets what we are going to train, right? Data privacy is the issue here. I think whatever data sets you are getting in from the public forum, that can be exposed to the clients.
Sure.
One of the key thing the customer is expecting is how secure the data is. So this is one of the key challenge, and also with the security issues. So whatever data you are giving, like so ChatGPT can be illusions, like it can give wrong information, but still you will be able to convince, right? Still that's a need for human in loop, like still we need to get a right picture from that, what data is coming in. The other thing is about privacy, data privacy already touched upon, security, and also about the cost.
Of course.
The cost of training this data set is going to be
rolling
enormous.
out these. Yeah.
I think everybody is talking about they are into Gen AI. It's all POC mode.
Yes.
They are not deployed in a scale mode. That's a reality. Many of the customers, when we go to the customer reality in production, they were asking how much potential, what will be the ROI, and what will be the cost of doing training this data set, and what kind of a privacy I'm going to get it, because it's not proprietary, right? This will be exposed to the external world, and people can play around with that. And recently we have seen, so many people are owning that IP. They are not owning the IP, but they're talking about infringement, like leaking the data and then misusing the data. So that's where we are bringing a framework of governance, the data governance and security and risk assessment, putting a legal audits, like wherever is needed in terms, like Luke has mentioned about there is a regulation which every government companies are seeking. Especially in US, right? Recently, they announced about executive order. Wherever you are publishing the AI information, that would need to be regularized. These are the key challenges, especially, when you try to migrate, when you try to adapt Gen AI things, right? You need to consider 3 different factors. One is the cost of training the data set.
Absolutely.
And what is the ROI? What is the particular use case you are going to get? I think deploying at a POC point of view is fine. When you are getting into real production time mode, the cost is humongous, like so if you look at the kind of adoption of GPT, right? It's all started in 2017. They had GPT-1.
Yes.
And it all rolled out to 2000. It's GPT. Like Luke mentioned about, in 2 days, they made 100 million subscribers. I think 1 million subscribers. Within a couple of months, they hit 100 million subscribers.
Yeah.
Now the issue is really coming across, what will be the cost? Every query, it's going to cost you more, like tokenization and amount of resource, like capacity, infrastructure, you need to train that model. This is a typical, primary challenges, anybody who wants to implement at a scale, right, they will face it. To avoid this, to tackle these challenges, you need to have a good capacity, selecting a right LLM model. So that's why, we have a lot of, I have been advocate for Hugging Face and LLMs, where we allow large language modules, open source LLM modules, especially Mistral, especially Llama 2, pick up a right model, and, you need to depend on the use case, what value and what ROI you're going to bring on. Train the data set, within privacy, like, you can train the data set. It shouldn't be biased. And also you try to build explainability, whatever you're training on the data set. So that's where people are ethics, like, responsibility we're talking about. Building explainability and creating a debias, how I debias the LLMs, right? I think, the open source LLMs.
That's very important.
So these are the key things, key solutions I'm giving, like, you need to debias LLMs, bring in a factor of ethical explainability, responsible AI. and put a governance framework on data security and also security and compliance. Like, there are a lot of regulations with respect to India, right? I think PDI and PII. So they are talking about sovereign AI, platforms. I was part of sovereignty in Singapore when I was working in Singapore.
Sure.
They were leveraging blockchain technology.
All right.
There are so many technologies that has been evolving. You look at the adoption of big data, right? If you look at the adoption, the technology has been there for 10 years, but only 50% they have been adapted now. If you look at blockchain, only 8% they have been adapted. They have been in the market for 8 years. Gen AI typically takes 2 to 3 years, but the kind of buzz it has been created, right? When it goes to real mode, that's where the real challenge comes into place.
All right.
When I had a discussion with many of the CFOs, right, they really talked about what will be the cost, what will be the ROI. Let me step back. You show me the real value add on what will be the security and compliance when it comes to banking, when it comes to regulation and compliance.
Where data is very crucial, yes.
Yeah.
I'll come back to you. Yeah.
If I may add,
Yes, absolutely.
The conversation around is essentially the change management. The conversation around is my data also being used to train the model, right? That becomes a paramount
concern, yes.
right? Concern from customers. So while a customer is okay to take the external data, pre-trained model because it's intelligent, but my data has to be secure. That is number one. Number two, when you talk about ROIs, traditionally the ROIs on AI has been a capex at the beginning, which is significantly high, and then probably something to maintain infrastructure.
Yes.
Now the game has changed from a capex to an opex, which means what is my opex spend that is going to really drive my ROI here. So there is a shift in the way that we look at AI, as opposed to how we did traditionally infrastructure and cloud. The same conversation is now hitting us, saying when will I hit my when will I hit my break even? So that is something which requires a lot more analysis, a lot more consulting into this, and then the predictability of outcomes has to be really spot on. So these are a couple of points I would like to add on top.
All right.
So that your generative AI story becomes a lot more comprehensive.
Definitely.
Exactly. One of the conversations we're having, very similar point actually, is it's not necessarily now building or training the model. That's almost like, well, we don't necessarily need to do so much anymore because we can leverage a third-party large language model and we can either fine-tune or build a RAG architecture on top of it. It's the cost of inferencing afterwards, which many of our customers are fearful of, because the expected subscriptions or customer inquiries is very speculative, and the cost is significant. And coming up the balance and then calculating an ROI that can then be justified with the CFO and the finance team, it is tough as well. And one of the areas that we're now seeing come, especially in larger enterprises, is AI governance. How are we managing this? How do we know that the data that's coming in we can use that data? What is the back-to-back indemnification with the model providers? You've seen 2 weeks ago, we indemnify the Titan models because we know exactly what data it was trained on, so we can know what's going to be produced. But can you say that about every single other model that may be being used? And it starts raising a lot of questions that CROs are going, hold on a minute. So yes, it started off as a CDO, CTO, CIO. Now it's fast bringing in the CFOs and CROs into the conversation as well.
Yeah, I was coming to, yes, go on. Sure.
This is a different dimension to the discussion. We did a survey of some of our customers. Over 1,000 customers participated in the survey. And to our surprise, the one that topped the list when it comes to barriers for adoption was not cost, was not privacy, was not security, it was reliability.
All right.
A lot of customers felt the technology is still not reliable, and that is an area that needs a lot of attention.
Right.
Of course, cost, privacy, other things are concerns, but the ecosystem will make sure that eventually that is under control. So until the technology matures and becomes truly reliable, we are not going to see a lot of production implementations, but in-house implementations and things that don't necessarily impact their business to a very large extent are the ones that will see significant adoption.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for that. Coming to you, Mr. Rahul, what are your thoughts on the barriers or the challenges, and also how do you choose between a smaller model, especially when a somewhat similar larger model can also, give you the business outcomes? How do you really choose between the various models while rolling out these initiatives?
So let me just answer the question on data security and the barriers that was asked earlier.
Yes.
So data security, we chose Azure and Amazon as our partners.
All right.
So by default, Azure and Amazon provide security by providing it within the VPC.
Sure.
We didn't use open source models, right? So we didn't use it.
All right.
The reason for that was obviously because we were working with enterprise clients who needed security and so on and so forth. The other problem which came was reliability or accuracy of the answers. And that was also taken care of by the model and the way we trained it. So when we train the model, we don't use OpenAI or other models predefined language structures. We just train it on the model, on the data sets that we use.
All right.
And then, we provide the language capabilities of the LLMs. So, and then we use RAG so that it searches it and provides the answers properly.
All right.
And it provides it with the, URL at the bottom, which is this is where I got it from. So
Alright.
that's something that we did. Now, in terms of large models versus
Smaller
small
models.
I really don't know why it's such a big question because if you look at Azure or if you look at Amazon, Hugging Face, etc., what I'm seeing is for industries, Hugging Face has models for, let's say, for example, life sciences, etc., which are good, correct? If it is good for that industry, it's good.
Sure.
But for support, etc., where we don't have any model, any model will do, large or small. It's just about maintaining the cost and ensuring security. And it's a cross between either your cost is high because you're secure,
Sure.
or your cost is low, but the language model is small.
All right. Coming to you, Mr. Regin, how are you planning to build up expertise in these areas? Are you planning to set up maybe centers of excellence for your employees to upskill them and address such concerns?
So there are two ways which we are looking at it. So one is saying that how do we build the general awareness about the technology, because that's very important. As business users, they understand what the technology can bring onto the table. So to that extent, we are working with partners to ensure that they educate the art of possibility,
Sure.
so that and then at two levels. One is at the leadership level, so that they can open up their minds on saying that where shall I invest on? And there are two lenses in which we are looking at it. One is saying that whether it is a routine or operational things, so things you do day to day. The second is what we are looking at, saying that it's a breakthrough or game changing. Could it add to my top line in terms of new business models?
Sure.
So that's one aspect. The second is at an operational level employee, and that is where I mentioned of the first category. So in my daily routine operations, how can the GenAI technology or the use cases augment an employee in his day-to-day tasks? So unless you are aware of what the technology can do, and the reason I'm specifically saying what the technology can do, because if you look at GenAI as a technology is something which, unlike most of the other things we have mentioned, blockchain, Meta, etc., this was a technology in its current form which was released to consumers, enterprises, and IT services companies all together. So as consumers, they have formed a point of view on how they have used it in their day-to-day life,
All right.
which will be very unlikely on how you will use it in enterprise context. That's why that training part becomes. So that is one part of it. The second part, see, as a customer company, that's where I limit my training to. Where we are looking at is saying that how do we look at our partners in terms of ensuring that this center of excellence get established, so that they can then start work with our business teams in developing use cases around this area. That is one aspect. The second aspect is also where I'm working with is to, we have discussed a lot of those, mention about cost, which is there, and that is one area which is still not clear.
Yes.
Because in the initial stages, there are a lot of investment happening. There are a lot of funds being thrown in to ensure that pilots work, etc. Nobody is clear about how is the long-term cost working too. So building a business case is one area where we are working on, apart from the knowledge part, on how do we really ensure that the use cases we build in this area, what is the right metric to build business case around? Is it about cost saving? Is it about revenue generation? Or is it just about employee experience being improved around? That's the other aspect where we are looking at building expertise on, saying that, and working with our finance teams also, saying that, okay, what is the right metric we should track for each of the specific use cases?
All right. Thank you for that. Yes.
Let me add one
Sure.
perspective here. What doesn't change is the problem solving. So in terms of enabling the workforce, there is one more tool to your problem solving.
All right.
So the change management around that tool, the learning around that tool, which is generative AI, the LLMs today, is one more entity in your kit. The philosophy, however, remains that any solution has to be well architected.
Absolutely.
Of course, the well architected programs now include this, but the philosophy remains that the problem solving doesn't change. So my perspective to AI, I think I draw a leaf from Professor Thomas Malone from MIT. Is it's not just the computers in the loop. It's about humans in the. I'm sorry, it's not about the humans in the loop. It's about the computers in the group, which means humans still are empowered to solve the problems, and human creativity is what overrides at any point in time. So the problem solving, in essence, the kind of enablement that you do from your enterprise architecture, how you see right from a concept to a production, is fundamentally within the problem solving. So the problem solving is what continues to remain intact, and this becomes one more technology to solve the problem. So the big picture is very important.
Absolutely. Well pointed out. Coming to you, Mr. Kush, what are your thoughts on how are you actually within the organization planning to build internal competence and ensure the best practices are rolled out? And how are you achieving this? If you could share some interesting use cases or specific examples here.
Yeah. So within our organization, we have several initiatives, learning programs specifically launched for at all levels, right? At leadership level, at developer level, for everybody to understand the possibilities, right? And that's very, very important because that's a basic step actually, and not just at my organization, right? But I would say, I think in the beginning, right, you mentioned the possibility of, the economy in India, right? Digital economy reaching 1 trillion, right? The most important part is that how do we develop this ecosystem of the knowledge base, right? So the more we invest as an organization and all as IT organizations, I would say all of us, right, in developing this knowledge base on creating more and more people with that kind of knowledge and the skill, the better we would be in terms of our ability to actually monetize it, right? If I compare to where we were in 2017 when I was working in a different organization, I was working on a AI product development, right? At that point of time when I was looking for AI resources, right, I had to really search through and look at everywhere and actually mostly look beyond India.
Yes.
I was finding people in Eastern Europe, US, everywhere, but not in India. Right?
That's changed, hopefully.
That's absolutely changed. Now you can find it, maybe next door itself.
Yes.
Right. So that's
a good thing.
So that's where we have to reach. Actually, we need to. So in my organization, it need not be that everybody is using it, but I would prefer the way our organization is approaching it is we want everybody to be aware. We want everybody to be trained. So if you will be able to look at an opportunity and see whether you can use it or not. So that's the approach, I have seen being taken in our organization.
All right. Thank you for sharing that. Coming to you, Mr. Rajneesh, could you tell us how generative AI is actually optimizing supply chain management with a particular focus on retail demand forecasting? Because, of course, Gen AI enables one to identify patterns and predict customer requirements. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So, one of the use cases definitely is on the supply chain side where you can collect a lot of information from the entire chain, right? The users, the social media, the need from the users that is coming through, and on a continuous basis feed that into the entire supply chain process, right? And I think the key difference that it has been there for years, right, with the traditional AI as well, but with the generative AI, the whole process of building that value chain, right, where you can create the new intelligence or insights has become much more faster because you can feed the plain text information, right, and the data that is coming from various channels can be fed as it is without trying to pattern it or create it into various forms that are required for AI to consume in the earlier stages. So I think what has happened there mainly is the faster development process or faster deployment of generative AI for supply chain use cases. I also want to mention one thing that in the supply chain cycle as well as in many other use cases, one side benefit that we are seeing, right, outside of what we are doing with AI is there is suddenly an improved focus on data quality. And we have a lot of requests, a lot of projects starting in improving data quality with customers, right? On the supply chain side, significantly, because traditionally the data collected and stored has not been used a lot, but now when you are using it, hallucination is much more higher if you have any kind of issues in the data, right? And there is a lot of incorrect insights or data that is coming out. So therefore, increased effort in correcting the data, whether it is on requirements data that is used for design automation, or whether it is on supply chain, that has increased as well.
All right. I'd like to come to you. Yeah, sure.
Comment on what Rajneesh said. Because if you look at from a supply chain management point of view, AI has always been existing there. So we have been using it for forecasting, predictability, using multiple models, etc.
Yes.
I think where Gen AI would also make a difference is also in terms of bringing in explainability to the model. Because one of the reasons for, I would say, lack of trust or adoption was that it is a black box. AI used to be a black box. We never understood what was happening. So where we are looking at Gen AI is also to say that could this be used to bring in some explainability in a business context. So these are the variables which has been put into the model. This is how what has been the propensity, saliency, etc., which has been considered to arrive at an output. Translate that into a business language, which then becomes very acceptable. And that's where I see it's very powerful, because otherwise the trust has been missing in a lot of the forecasting models. Gen AI, by writing it in plain English, which understands into the industry context, whether it is consumer products, whether it is industry, manufacturing, wherever it is, Gen AI will be able to help us bring that business context in explaining, which I feel will help adopt not just Gen AI, but also the traditional AI models which has been existing in this area.
Definitely. Interesting points there, yes.
I missed, that reminds me of one more aspect, right? I think while it is used in the implementation stage, the usability of the supply chain solution has also improved, because now you can just ask a question in a regular text and create various dashboards, various reports that you need within seconds, right? I think that's helping in terms of the regular users using it, the easiest way that they can use it.
All right. I'd like to bring you in, Mr. Guruprasad. Data is a very key ingredient for successful Gen AI implementation. So what is your data strategy and how are you using it to fine-tune the LLMs?
So obviously we are following some of the best practices. As you know, there are inherent challenges with LLM, such as hallucination and several others. RAG has become a very popular approach of mitigating that risk. Well, personally, I believe RAG is a temporary approach, and a few years from now, people will probably do away with that and start interacting with the LLMs directly, because they will become a lot more transparent, a lot more explainable. So our strategy has been to make sure that the data is sourced correctly. We put together a mechanism where every use case gets registered first within the organization before people start implementing it. So we have people who are arguing, debating, and contributing to the cause to say where you need to source the data, how you need to source the data, what are the guardrails that need to be built around it before you actually start implementing it. From an implementation perspective, we are building several layers to making sure that there is a very high level of abstraction, so that people don't directly interact with models, rather interact with APIs and systems that we build, so that there is a lot of transparency and we can build additional guardrails to manage that. And sourcing of data is going to be a continuous process. There's new data that is getting created, which is LLM friendly. So we are making sure that the data that gets generated is capable of training these models and strengthening the models. And the existing ones, we're putting them through a process where we are analyzing, cleansing them, and adding that back to the ecosystem. So it's a very comprehensive strategy.
Sure.
So adding to his point, right?
Yes.
I think, if you talk about data, the quantum of data we are talking about in cleansing and process of extraction and doing a classification, right? See, everybody is talking about deploying the data in data center or in private or public cloud. But you need to think about deploying this in edge computing using, all the data you need, no need to expose in a cloud or in a private data centers. You can have this data, because we are talking about billions of data here, the parameters. So my suggestion is, using efficient way of, using leveraging edge data, whatever data that you want to consume internally, that can be streamlined.
All right. I'd like to bring you in, Mr. Ram. When it comes to data strategy, that is like the key differentiator of the success of your Gen AI initiatives. So if you could tell us, how are you really achieving this? Are you looking at using your various data repositories within the organization to fine-tune your LLMs and optimize your generative AI outcomes?
So first and foremost, data infrastructure is very complex in any enterprise. While we work for our customers, we already see a data footprint, which means I have an ingestion system. I have a layer for data in rest. I have a layer for data in motion, and there is the outcomes where I do where I have reporting, the data consumed in a typically a data lake kind of an infrastructure, or a lakehouse kind of an infrastructure for reporting, machine learning, and so on and so forth.
Sure.
So what becomes fundamental is a data governance. So regardless of whether it is a generative AI workload or another workload, the data governance becomes very significant. The capabilities around data governance is very fundamental for any data engineering stream. So whether it is master data management or data in rest and data in motion, from a data governance perspective, the stewardship there is very important. From a system of record, the data quality is very important. And also, while you are dealing with the reporting data and the analytical data, it's important to also have the provenance. Now with generative AI, the story has changed from a human provenance to a machine-led provenance, right? So there's quite a lot of possibility and value that we are bringing from a machine-led provenance. Fundamentally, if you'd ask me, the data governance is something very, very important from a data management perspective. Now, besides from talking, stretching a bit into the data security, it's not just the protection against hackers, but it's also about roles and responsibilities in an organization, like how we are able to do an access control, how we are able to authorize somebody for a data, bringing in the elements of coarse-grained and fine-grained data access. Those are all going to be fundamentally important when you are providing data access. A department A should not be able to really see, let's say, a legal department. Data may not be always be accessed by HR function. Likewise, the reverse is true. So it is important to also, as part of your data management, and these are like foundational principles in any data strategy. And I see generative AI no different from others. The other aspect is, while there are really techniques to do the data in rest and data in motion from a data security governance perspective, we also need to look at data in memory, which is where I think the industry is also evolving towards something called as confidential computing, where the data protection is also happening at this processor level. When the instructions are running, when the data is being processed at a chip level, at the edge level or the server level, there's enough data security baked in. So that evolution is happening as we speak. But the earlier two parts, which is data at rest and data in motion, there's quite a lot of techniques and capability available, and we have a zero trust security policy in all our customer engagements and in whatever we do as an enterprise.
All right, thanks. Yes.
Data biasing, I think that is one of the important thing. Like, so whatever data you are claiming, right, it's going to be biased. So you need to de-bias the data. So we have started design structure, right? We need to de-bias the data so that the data, whatever you are consuming or you're training the data sets, right, that is more relevant.
Absolutely. Coming to you, Debashish, data privacy, security, as all of them mentioned, are major concerns whenever we talk about generative AI. And while an organization may want to use the internal organizational data that has been collected to fine-tune their LLMs, it is very critical to ensure that ethical standards or security standards are being followed. So how are you ensuring that within the organization?
Well, if you look at data governance, and I'm just speaking about that. Probably for the IT industry, you will find more or less almost all of them have a very, very strong fundamental layer of data governance. There is a structure, there is a kind of very defined format in terms of how you deal with data at both motion, the data store, as well as in the computer as well. And in terms of the access part of it, again, there is a defined way how it happens. So while that is all defined, what is possibly making the difference now is, if you look at in the earlier time, the same data was consumed and probably represented in a different narrative in the past. Gen AI is killing that. Gen AI is killing that because the emotions are not there. It is pure truth, right? So that is a very, very interesting aspect of data coming out in terms of how you are consuming it. At the same time, if you look at how we have done internally, is we have a very strong process around it. We have a governing committee which set to kind of look into this part, and we do regular reconciliation and verification. That is part of the process again, and that is what ensures we are always aligned to the truth.
All right. Would you like to add to this, Mr. Regin? How are you ensuring that your data does not make its way into the public domain, whether it has been collected, for internal purposes or external engagements?
So one part is about educating the employees itself, and then putting in the necessary controls on differentiating between an equivalent of, because there is access to ChatGPT, there is an access to an internal chat application as well. So how do you differentiate and put in the necessary guardrails to ensure that the data which is relevant for internal only stays internal and doesn't go external? That is one aspect. The second is also working around with the partners whom are working around and saying that how do their security controls are in place to ensure that the data which we and Luke mentioned about that fact, saying that your data remains internal in terms of training this, and also get that output on saying that yes, the outcome has been trained on these elements of data. So that becomes a reassurance for the relevant business owners to say that, okay, this is my sales data which is being used. It has not gone outside, and nothing else which is coming from outside has influence where it is not required. So that's an important part. I think like any other aspect around security, it's like safety. The buck stops at the employee. So you have to train them a lot to ensure that this is there, because you can't use any other means. The employee has to be trained and understand the importance of data security to ensure this aspect. It's no different from any other information security aspect is what I would highlight.
All right. Yes, sure.
Add to that. Part of this process, I speak to a lot of customers, right? And any customer I've spoken to at an enterprise level, first reaction comes, is it safe to open it up, or should we protect it or completely close it internally within the enterprise? We will not give access to anyone to kind of use this technology, right? And that was the initial reaction. But if you look at in current times, almost everybody has figured out a mechanism how to deal with it. And I think we spoke about Zero Trust some time back, and that is definitely helping to ensure that whatever access you do for an open environment like ChatGPT or so, that remains completely isolated. That remains inside those secure browsers, so that you don't have the ability to do content paste into that browser or bring anything back into your environment. Likewise, there are possibilities you might be working for some customer environment which is possibly need to have access to the external side of it, and your governance team who is sitting with your risk office, legal, and so on and so forth will get into the details to see whether it is allowed for you to kind of enable those kind of access, and that is what possibly is kind of ensuring the protection is maintained there.
Great. All right. Yes.
If I may add, generative AI gives a lot more power to hackers as much as defenders, right? Which means that there are a lot more powerful ways of attacking you, and you need to be really resilient. Be it whatever they do model theft or data poisoning or any other technique that are like very prevalent in the AI security sector. We need to be aware. We need to be really conscious of that. We need to be really doing your threat modeling, your response to cyber attacks. All of that has to be really highly super automated, and also the right techniques has to be done. In fact, generative AI also helps in better monitoring your threats, right? So the counter to generative AI based attacks is also there in the generative AI stack. So we need to really
the problem and the solution both are together. Yes.
So we need to be really aware of that, and then beef up the security technology that you're using, and then that becomes a constant pursuit for quality.
Sure. Rahul, what are your thoughts? What would you like to say?
See, I believe that one of our customers, who is a fintech major, actually limited the KBs and everything else to its own products. They didn't allow generative AI to learn other products or to give answers from open LLMs.
All right.
Which essentially made sure that their data was protected, and it's only from the internal system. So they classified it as internal versus external. If I remember correctly, they did a pilot with somebody else previously. And when they put in the customer's competitors' information, it gave the answer.
All right.
So then the CTO said, "Bugger off."
All right, yes.
He's talking about is the private GPT.
Yes.
Building a private GPT.
All right.
for your
So coming to you, Mr. Raghav, the IT services industry actually needs to ensure that there is quality, there is accuracy. So what kind of mechanisms are you using to make sure that, or what kind of metrics are you using to make sure the accuracy of your Gen AI outcomes?
Definitely, this is a very good question. So if you look at the developer community, right, because they have been familiar with GitHub Copilot and Code Whisperer, we use a stat and design patterns, like, what will be the outcome. Even it can generate documentation, it can generate test cases generation, everything. Whatever output you are getting it, right, we will do a feedback mechanism. Like that's where human in loop will come into. Like the architect will select the particular code and what will be the efficient code, to take that and then to implement in a particular design solution of whatever the problem statement is.
Sure.
In case of customer experience, right, I think, in case of customer experience, where you see a lot of agents are, spending a lot of time in answering, addressing the patterns from the customer side. So this can be leveraged very effectively. We have a certain pattern, like, so which we can leverage. This pattern is going to give a lot of information about in a fraction of seconds or 1 or 2 minutes time instead of, taking a lot of time.
All right.
So we have a certain design patterns to address all these issues.
Okay. Mr. Guru Prasad, how do you measure and report if there are any hallucinations, and what is your strategy here, when it comes to quality and accuracy?
Yeah. First of all, it's just too hard to track and measure hallucination. But that said, while we are building systems to leverage and make use of Gen AI, we are also building systems to measure the outcome of these exercises. So on one side, while we are implementing and adopting them, there are also systems that are evolving that are checking the accuracy and effectiveness of these systems. So we obviously have a human in the loop,
Sure.
and they are helping us measure the outcomes of these exercises. So that has been one of the approaches.
All right.
In addition to that, before bringing scale to whatever we do, this goes through a very comprehensive exercise of a POC, a pilot, and then try it with a few select accounts, and then eventually scale to a larger group. And through that process, we tend to learn, and then we try to bring that back into the model. So that's essentially been our experience. But there's no foolproof way of actually measuring hallucination and mitigating that. But hopefully, in partnership with some of the hyperscalers like AWS, we will be able to very quickly overcome that, and we're looking forward to that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Mr. Rajneesh, how is Cyient using technology to, explore new avenues of growth or align itself with the current constantly evolving needs of the market?
Yeah, so we identified, we actually talked about 200 plus customers, identified few areas where they are looking at the use case that is applicable for them.
Sure.
Right. In the last 12 months or so, we worked about 150 plus POCs with those use cases. Right. So there has been a lot of interest, a lot of anxiety about using generative AI and making sure they are in that rigor of using at least some exploration of the generative AI use cases. So that's already in place. But from there, the conversion into actual next steps from POC to actual implementation has been about 10 to 15% so far, right? And I think we talked about many of the reasons why it is not going there. But what we have done right now is, as I said earlier, we identified few areas where we want to proactively explore with customers and say that, okay, this is an area where we want to bring in AI and improve productivity for you on projects that we are already working on, or create new projects where they can do better productivity. Design automation is the first one. Second one is on I think the second area is not very successful so far, but bringing in legacy to new code migration, test automation, regulatory process compliance, etc. The regulatory process is probably where it is picking up significantly in healthcare, but that's the second area. Third area is on decision making, which we said we will jointly invest in creating use cases with our customers, especially in aerospace, energy, and healthcare segments, predictive maintenance or related areas for customers there. So I think these three areas and very focused effort in implementing the required use cases for our customers is yielding results for us so far.
Sure.
So adding to his point, right? One key important thing is infrastructure. We are missing out the infrastructure provisioning and configuration. That is taking a huge effort. Like, that's where we can see the real value of to the customers. Like, if you want to provision one VMs, into the cloud environment, right? Whatever. Ansible, or you need to have a lot of technologies there. But here, GenAI, what it does is, it can deploy this solution in a, in a 1 or 2 days time. this configuration capability, right? That's where it can bring more value to the customers, end user customers. Yeah.
Absolutely. So you touched upon it. Coming to you, Mr. Regin, how are you ensuring, given the rapid advancements in AI, how do you ensure that your firm remains compliant with the constantly evolving regulations? And also, what he touched upon earlier, how do you resolve or address bias?
So on the first part on remaining compliant, I think that's an important area, and especially the data privacy rules is something which you're worried about, especially when you're looking at use cases where you expose to consumers all the things around ensuring that you're taking their consent, that remains, the use case remains, etc. It doesn't get used for, because that's the biggest worry. If you have taken a consumer consent for a particular use case, how do you ensure that that particular data is used only for the use case which is relevant for? Because one of the biggest worries which we have is that once it gets into the repository, it should not be used to train something else.
Absolutely.
So that violates the consent which you have taken. So those are areas which still have not proven, and that's some of the concerns which we have. We need to watch through on how we are going to handle that. The second aspect is about also looking at the aspect of how we have discussed about it earlier also. How do you put in the security controls to ensure that you're not exposing your data outside, and also not bringing in data from external which violates your own corporate business policies which are there. That's other aspect. The second part of the question around bias is something which is still to be proven. What we are looking at is saying that why building the models, etc., how you continue to ensure that, and this is true for even when you're building the earlier AI models. I don't see the Gen AI anything different, because bias was a problem earlier, bias continues to be a problem here. So those metrics continue to ensure that you continue review the outcomes which are there to ensure that bias, we spoke about hallucination, these issues do not creep in, and you continuously monitor the quality of the output to ensure that. I think the important part, and where I see the difference with Gen AI, is that we always speak about human augmented Gen AI. So at least now there is a human in the room to validate it.
Yes.
When do we reach that stage where the model has learned with the biases and there is no human to validate? That's the biggest worry which we have in future.
All right.
Just to add to two aspects, right? So the compliance and privacy, right?
And ensuring transparency also.
Ensuring transparency. See, compliance is, I think it's a very evolving scene when it comes to AI, right? So a lot of governments, a lot of regulators are looking at, how do I define compliance in this particular area? So I think we have to go back to the drawing board and see that, okay, what are we trying to comply to, right? So one is the data, right? So the data should be secure. So if we can apply the fundamental principles of how were you securing data so far, right? You were using big data, most of us were, right? We were using data lakes, right? So how were we securing the data? So if you look at that and then see that, if the same kind of, principles are getting applied when you're using AI, I think that could help. At the same time, we need to work together with the regulators and the governments, right? So Luke mentioned that they're working with the governments to define, the governance around it. So that's the other one. Bias, right? Bias has been a problem even with the AI. Again, how to unbias it, right? How to take care of bias? How will they take care of bias? By understanding your data sources, making sure that your data sources are diversified, right? Because in a country like India, a bias can make a big difference, right? We are a very diversified country. So it's very, very important that you understand as a user, as a company, right? You understand where are your data sources, whether you're using LLMs or you're using your own model, right? Understanding the data sources and ensuring, and that's where we humans come into the picture, right? If we can make a call on, what kind of data I want to be used in terms of, understand and see that whether the data sources which have been used for this training this model, whether it is fit for my purpose or it ethically fit for my purpose, right? More importantly, then, that can make a big difference.
Sure. Coming to you, Mr. Rahul, how important is AI ethics, when it comes to the context of GI initiatives, and especially when you're building on or planning to offer those to your internal and external customers? What are your thoughts?
So, I believe responsible AI and explainable AI are very important from the data perspective as well.
Sure.
So when we say explainable AI, it should be able to explain the decision. And that is, okay. So, okay, explainable AI and responsible AI are very important from a data strategy perspective as well. When I say explainable AI, it should be able to explain the way it reached a decision.
Mhm.
And Gen AI, if you ask it to explain, most of the times it's able to explain it. Whether with biases, whether without biases, is something that the human in the loop will look at, but it is able to explain.
All right.
Responsible AI
Mhm.
is when you take that explainable AI and make sure that the human in the loop is made responsible to
And
say that this
accountable,
is
yes.
correct.
Mhm. Sure.
This is the right decision that the AI has made, that the Gen AI has made, and you can now let it go, move
Alright.
forward. So that is important from that perspective.
Mhm.
The second part of your question was, how do I ensure it? We ensure it by doing appropriate trainings,
Mhm.
appropriate modeling, and ensuring that the people who are training the data sets or training the Gen AI
Sure.
are trained on responsible AI, are trained on explainable AI, and are leveraging the principles of those.
Mhm.
Because with the human in the loop, humans also come with biases.
Definitely, yes.
Correct.
That's
so
true.
so we have a diverse set of individuals who train the data,
Mhm.
who look at the trained data and make inferences and say this is not correct, revert it back, and do the training once again. So that is how we do it. I don't think it's 100% accurate yet, but we are close to 90-95% accurate when it comes to responsible AI.
Oh, that's
So that's
remarkable.
how we do it. Yes.
Great. Thank you. Very pertinent points there. Coming to you, Luke, what do you think are the steps that firms should take at an organizational level to ensure that the best practices when it comes to responsible and ethical AI are actually followed?
Yeah, it's a very, very broad topic. I mean, we talk about ethics in AI. We have a big program internally called Responsible AI,
Mhm.
which covers everything from responsibility. I mean, the whole notion of generative AI is that content is being generated
Yes.
by technology and machines. Content can be in the form of videos, it can be in the form of media, it can be in the form of text. And we got to be careful and have the right frameworks in place to ensure that the intent of what was being created, because there are some malicious intents out there,
Mhm.
and the models out there have been trained on vast quantities of data, and you can start creating guidelines and so on to how to hotwire a car and so on and so forth. So we have to take note that we are responsible for what we're putting out there. So we have to put the right guidelines and frameworks in place. Fairness and bias is significant, and it becomes, think about a digital advertising agency in, say, Japan, and they want to market to doctors. They'll
Mhm.
say, create an image of a doctor. And you
Yes.
go to some of the image generation models, they'll create a white face male.
Mm.
And it's like, well, that's not very gender diverse. And it won't be necessarily specific to, say, Japan. And you mentioned here in India as well, there's the same diversities as well, even within India.
Yes.
So we have to be careful of that.
Mhm.
And then whatever's being produced at the end of it, well, who owns it? I mean, the intellectual property of it, we haven't even touched on the compliance and regulatory adherences that we have to follow. But it's also, do you own it? Can you actually do anything with the data as well? And then that all comes back into, well, what is the transparency, traceability, and explainability of what you've just produced?
Sure.
And that has to come back to, yes, to the underlying model, but it also comes back to right at the beginning, we said, what problem are you solving for?
Mhm.
Where is the data that you're going to use to create this outcome? Does it adhere with all the policies that we thought it should? Are we meeting all the steps along the process? And then ruthless testing, beta testing, experimentation. Is it meeting our own sense check and guidelines of what we can produce out to market? And if it isn't, what do we need to do? Do we need to use a different model? Do we need to fine tune it with more of our own data? Do we need to put our own data sources against it to make it more fair and responsible in the outcome? Or do we just go down to more detailed prompt engineering
Mhm.
just to be able to produce the outcomes that we think are fair and responsible? We're helping our customers in that journey. We've launched in the last couple of weeks guardrails on Amazon Bedrock. We had SageMaker clarified to provide some explainability, and we've also announced the model cards as well to actually provide some more detail on how the model was trained, what it was trained on, and it's going to continue. And if you've looked at Amazon Q, it's very similar to the use case you're mentioning. Is once you finished it, it says where it got the data from. What is your document repository? Because trust is probably the last thing. This is only really going to take off as much as we think it is if it's trusted, not just by us, by our colleagues internally, but also by the external communities as well.
Yes.
One more point to add.
Sure.
When you talk about personal data, there's an element of consent.
Yes.
So that's something that
another critical aspect. Yes.
Yeah, that's a very critical aspect. Let's say even if it's like a face biometric that allows you access into a public facility, how do you ensure that the system doesn't use that data to really that data doesn't get leaked and then it is used in a very different manner.
Inappropriate manner, yes.
There's an element of consent at the source when it is to deal with the personal data, and that is very much there is a provenance to that also. Like it is visible, it is transparent, it is safe, and it is also trustworthy.
Definitely.
So that kind of mechanism also has to come in when you are dealing with data which is of personal nature and also sensitive nature.
Sure.
Adding to his point, there is in India especially PDP, Personal Data Protection Act, right? There are some LLMs which is providing that features like how do you protect the data, and also PI like personal information, like what you don't want to share it to others, right? So that model is still evolving. I think that's where we have to look into it. Yeah,
definitely. So just before we wrap up this discussion, one question to you, Mr. Debashish, which is the elephant in the room, and you kind of touched upon it earlier. When we talk about costs of all these innovations and automations, within your organization, how are you actually using certain metrics to measure the ROI of these AI initiatives?
I think our theme is boardroom dialogues, and this is a question in every single board meeting. You want this investment, obviously, what is the return on that investment? And Gen AI, definitely, as we all spoke about, it is expensive. So there are different ways to kind of measure it, but I will give some scenarios on which we generally work on. If we look at confidentiality and data privacy part of it, many a time I can't use an open AI environment and try to get the result of kind of whatever the business problem I'm trying to solve. So I might have to look at private instances for that, and that adds up to my cost. So that is where we have to look at every single instance, every single use case. Is it really adding? Is there a ROI which is positive? Is it really adding value? Is it giving me an edge in terms of my revenue growth? Is it making me much quicker, faster, and agile? Sure. If it is so, maybe you can take that as an investment. Otherwise, you have to think whether I should really look at it. That is one part. Second, which is more kind of pertinent from the today's context of SaaS environments. If you look at, we definitely use a lot of SaaS solutions, and majority of the SaaS operator use the backend AI engines, and they try to kind of service similar industry customers in the same platform. And what happens in there is your data definitely gets shared between your competitors and so on and so forth. And if you want to stop that, you might have to bring everything to your private instance. Is that a possibility? And is that commercially viable? Sure. And those are the questions. Possibly we don't have clear answer as we speak, but yes, and we need to.
Would you like to add quickly key metrics that you are using to evaluate the success of Gen AI initiatives?
Very similar. It's about the return of investment and how do I ensure that the OPEX story is very much intact from a break-even perspective. It's also about how you choose the problems that you solve right up front, which means how you fail fast, how you sort of pivot and then pick those use cases that are going to promise the right outcomes. So it is a measure of outcome that you have a perception beforehand. That is going to be important as for you to be very successful, which is why we have enabled an emerging tech lab.
All right.
Which really helps you play and collaborate with both the technology and the business, be it our customers or be it our internal stakeholders. So at the point of us building a proof of concept, it's also the proof of value and the business case that supplements that. So the conversation has to be about the design thinking that happens at the beginning,
Sure.
how we sort of pivot into something that can really add value from an outcome perspective, and the outcomes are really going to be business outcomes.
Definitely.
So the algorithm is going to really supplement you, transform into that transform that business use case. Fundamentally, the success doesn't stop with whether there is just the algorithm performing better, which is like whether I'm able to do 95% or 90%. It is about, am I able to accelerate? Am I able to really bring in the time to market? Am I able to really bringing the return of investment earlier?
Sure.
Those are going to be very fundamental for us.
All right.
It is important that you pivot earlier and fail fast, so that we are more predictable and then solve the right problems.
All right. Your collaborations, of course, go a long way in unlocking potential or optimizing processes, enhancing, operations, and increasing productivity for organizations. So how important are such partnerships in achieving business objectives? Quickly, before we wrap up on this.
Absolutely of paramount importance. We can't do it ourselves. Often our customers can't do it ourselves. And it's like an ecosystem of both the underlying infrastructure and platforms. It's the underlying model providers, and it may not be owned, it may be third party. Also, the deployment and execution often comes from either internal resources or through third party SIs or GSIs.
Sure.
And then you need to launch the application as well to the communities and then continue to test it. So collaboration is absolutely key in this, because no one knows what the answer is. No one, if we fast forward 12 months, we'll probably all have a different interpretation of what it would look like.
Absolutely.
And without continued collaboration, we'll still be talking about responsible AI and having challenges unless we collaborate.
Great. So we're going to wrap up on this discussion. It was very insightful. And as you all mentioned, of course, today's digital era businesses are embracing technology at an unprecedented pace, and they need to be more intelligent, more data-driven, more secure, more interconnected. But just before we wrap up, in a single sentence, one sentence only, what should the IT sector do to seize the opportunities and harness Gen AI for transformation? One sentence.
Well, then it has to be choosing the right use case and ensuring the business value is delivered, keeping cost in mind.
All right. Mr. Ram.
I think embracing AI across the board in whatever we do.
All right.
That is going to be the mantra, because like how cloud was, today we build everything cloud native.
All right.
We did a mobile first, cloud first, and then now it is going to be AI first. That's how I would like to conclude.
So, Mr. Kush.
Adapt it, but be cautious of the way you adopt it.
All right, that was well said. Mr. Rajan.
So I will say make it business relevant, make the customers succeed on it. That's the only metric.
Mr. Rahul.
I would say prepare the use cases properly and then execute on them well by ensuring that you save cost and achieve the business objective.
Great. Mr. Rajneesh.
I would say two sentences probably, or two words. One is take care of the fear, which we talked about a lot, and also educate about the hype, because there's a lot of hype about AI and people need to be probably educated properly about what is the reality around AI as well. Yeah.
So for me, I think amplify AI for businesses. The next one is continuous invest in innovation and increase the talent pool, like, in this area. So that's where I see the traction, as well as in infrastructure, and also building a right data security framework and ethical framework and compliance framework. Yeah.
Sure. How can this sector seize opportunities in the coming future?
Yeah. So I think AI is this wonder fruit. So people who are going to leverage it might regret, but then eventually get it right. But people who are not going to leverage it will regret for sure. So it's better to try it and fail rather than not try it at all.
Yes, well said. Mr. Luke.
Yeah. Very similar point, actually. It's be utterly impatient on creativity and experimentation, but a little more patient on rolling out and scaling into production.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for sharing your insights and your experiences. It was a very remarkably insightful discussion. Clearly, the future of the IT industry is closely tied to harnessing the power of generative AI, because Gen AI offers opportunities in terms of innovation and automation and also improved decision making. And all this can truly reshape the IT landscape of the country. On that note, it's a wrap from all of us here. Thanks for watching.